Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. I will ask all the conference attendees to come into the plenary room. We are about to get started with our second plenary session. So welcome, everybody, to the plenary room. Before we get started, I will ask Toby Abrams, the chair of the credentialing committee, to come and give an updated report.
I like that. Thank you, Madam President. I'm pleased to present the following report. As of 2:30 this afternoon, we have 394 people have checked in for the conference. There are 310 voting members.
Thank you so much, Toby. All right. It's my great pleasure to welcome you back to the second plenary session. Today, we're going to talk about, this afternoon, we will talk about the current political climate, as if we would spend the weekend talking about anything else. We know there's an urgent need for targeted grassroots action. With me on the stage today is an amazing group of women who are leading the charge, creating meaningful feminist change in their communities and across the nation. I am so excited to share with you the fantastic work that these women are doing. First, it's my great pleasure to tell you a little bit about Marissa Alexander, the recipient of NOW's 2017 Woman of Courage Award. Marissa Alexander's story is well known to all of us. Marissa, an MBA graduate, was fulfilling a career in IT management when she was arrested and charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. This happened in August of 2010. And what was it that Marissa had done? Well, she had gone to her ex-husband's house, the house that she formerly shared with her ex-husband. He was abusive. They were separated. She had recently given birth to a baby. She needed him to sign some papers. She went to his house and he attacked her. He choked her. He threatened to kill her. She was able to talk him down, and she gets away, and then she goes in and finds a gun that she legally had, fires one shot into the ceiling, a warning shot. Now, in Florida, we know there is such a thing as a stand your ground law. But the judge in that case and the prosecutor, Angela Corey, insisted that Marissa was not allowed to use the stand your ground rule. This is the same Angela Corey who was so incompetent she couldn't convict the murderer of Trayvon Martin because he used the stand your ground law. She's gone. Now we clap. She's gone. Ultimately, Marissa's conviction was overturned, but initially she was sentenced to 20 years, I believe 20 years in prison. Her conviction was ultimately overturned. Florida Now and National Now became proud partners in the Free Marissa Now campaign. And Marissa's champions worked tirelessly to raise public awareness of what was happening, not only to Marissa, but to other women like her who have experienced domestic violence. Marissa was not freed from prison until I believe she had served 3 years. Right? Think about it. Think about it. Her daughter was 3 years old when she came out of incarceration. You know what makes Marissa the really perfect recipient of NOW's Woman of Courage Award is what Marissa did next. It was when she came out of prison, she founded the Marissa Alexander Justice Project. The Justice Project is a nonprofit organization that works with survivors of domestic abuse, with members of vulnerable communities and schools, with law enforcement, with lawyers, with policy makers to seek justice and provide support to those who are navigating the intersection of intimate partner violence and criminal justice. Now, before I bring Marissa up here to receive her award, I just want to share with you something that she said in an interview. She said, quote, "People assume that this isn't their fight, but it is. We need to change the narrative about what's accepted because there's a lot of problems that stem from abuse in the home. In my experience, people have this sense about women of color, that we're combative or angry all the time, that we deserve to be in these kinds of domestic violence situations, or we triggered a person to react in a certain way. But not everyone is like that. And other women are portrayed as being more agreeable, more docile. That's how the media, in the media. That was the narrative that the prosecutor painted for me. But the truth is, domestic violence doesn't see color. Today, Marissa Alexander is seen. She is heard. And she is making a difference, helping survivors find their voice. Please welcome the 2017 Woman of Courage, Marissa Alexander.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I need y'all to say it like y'all mean it. Hey! That's what I'm talking about. Thank you, thank you. I want to thank the National Organization of Women for this award, for nominating me and accepting me, and this is definitely an honor. My family thanks you. My friends thank you. My 3-year-old daughter, well, she's not 3 anymore, she's 6. She thanks you. And I also want to thank the National Organization of founder, Ms. Terry, thank you, as well as Judy Shecklin, which is the Jacksonville president, that particular chapter, and Vice President Juanita Powell. I have to tell you that God is my strength, and that is how I got through, and that is where my courage stems from. And I'd like to kind of tell you a little bit about courage. For me, it didn't come at some point. It was courage along the way. It continued as I went on that journey. Mind you, this was pretty much a 5-year journey to the point once I was completely done with incarceration of some type of sort. And I say that to tell you that a lot of the times when we speak about courage, we're not necessarily talking about one particular incident. It's really over a period of time. Because I know that as you do this work, women in this room and the women across the country, it's not just one incident of courage, it's several acts of courage that you continue to make and you continue to do as you go on in this movement that we have. And that is a lot of what I experienced as I transformed, I say, my pain into my purpose, which is what I've tattooed on my arm. It's my art here. And it's really, it represents that process and that journey of courage where you're transforming from a caterpillar into a butterfly, okay? So when we speak about courage, I'd like to say thank you to all the women who have been serving in this feminist movement and anything related to women's empowerment and being able to not just break through ceilings, glass ceilings and all of those things, but all of the efforts that these women and all of you women and women across the country in different movements, for different organizations, for different women of color, just for women in general. So thank you. I want to speak real quickly about, has anybody ever tried to walk backwards? Like, it's kind of hard, right? It's not normal, It takes a little bit, it's obviously a lot more arduous task than walking forward. And I believe that's kind of where we are in this nation, because it seems like there's this administration that wants to take us backwards. We're not going to stand for that. Right? And so with that said, we cannot become complacent. We can't become complacent because one person or a few women make it past the glass ceiling. We can't become complacent if our particular organizations are okay, and we have to encourage and uplift one another. And I say all that to say this: it's very important that as we move forward, okay, that we rise up, as the campaign says, we rise up now, and that we are not boa constrictors. And what they do, if you don't know, when they're attacking their prey, is they cut off their circulation. They cut them off. They coil up, they cut them off their circulation, and it prevents the blood flow. And that's what we can't afford as a movement. That is what we cannot afford as women. No matter what color, no matter what your preference is, sexuality, or any of that, as women, we have to be united. We have to be. We cannot be complacent. I say all that to say that this is non-negotiable in terms of we have to be settled and resolute that we will move forward regardless. We will stand up and we will speak. Your silence, our silence, will not protect us. Once we get in these rooms and we have the funding and the power to speak, do so. I had organizations that would not speak out against my case because they were threatened about their funding. And what message does that send? Especially if you're supposed to help other women. So I say, if you see that, be bold. Speak out. Say something. You know you're doing something, saying something more than anybody who doesn't say anything just by saying something, even if you don't donate $1. If you say something, that means your words have power. Lastly, I just want to thank the Free Marissa Now campaign, who just was so active in helping release me, along with other women, Survived and Punished, that mobilization, all of the people back in Jacksonville that started things up, Corrine Brown, my best friend. Y'all have no idea the things that this girl has done for me. My baby knows who I am because she made sure she knew who I was. I didn't see her until she was 3 years old. So I just want to say that my family, my children who are doing so well and they're resolute, and you all had something to do with me being able to come home and be a part of it. I didn't want anything but to be able to do this right here. Speak to you and you and you. I just want to be able to give back. So I pray that you will help me do that, as I will with National Organization of Women, and be deliberate and be actionable. And thank you.
Thank you so much. You were wonderful. It is my honor to introduce our next speaker, Diana Ramirez. Diana Ramirez is a first-generation Mexican-American with decades of experience advocating for national, state, and local policy issues. She currently serves as the interim co-director of the Restaurant Opportunities Centers United. ROC United joins restaurant workers, owners, and consumers in their mission to create a more equitable environment and to improve working conditions. They are focused on eliminating the sub-minimum wage for tip workers as a way of achieving greater racial and gender justice in the restaurant industry through their One Fair Wage campaign. And they're helping restaurant owners develop sustainable business practices with their High Road to Profitability program. ROC United is a crucial ally in the development of NOW's project Protect Immigrant Rights campaign. There are over 1.1 million undocumented immigrants employed in the restaurant industry. Today, we are working to turn restaurants across the country into safe havens against sexism, racism, and xenophobia, where everyone has a seat at the table. Please welcome Diana Ramirez.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. I am here to lift up tipped workers and the restaurant industry in this political context. Now, why are we talking about the restaurant industry in the era of a Trump administration? Well, it has a lot to do with Trump. But let me give you a little bit of history of ROC for those of you who have not heard about us and who are interested in our organization. The Restaurant Opportunity Center was started after 9/11 when one of the very fine dining establishment at the top of the North Tower called Windows on the World. It was one of the few restaurants that are unionized. 0.001% of restaurants to this day have collective bargaining agreements. And Windows on the World was one of them. After 9/11, the union hired an immigrant organizing center in New York City to provide support for the survivors who made it to work that day, who didn't, whose family needed support. And this small organizing center organized the survivors, and the owner of Windows on the World said, yes, of course you're gonna get your jobs back. Of course, you've been with me for 20 years or more. And then when the owner got money, federal grants to reopen in Times Square, he didn't let the union back in. And he didn't fulfill his promise to give people their jobs back. And so this small little organizing center came together and protested on the first day. And the owner said, okay, never mind. We don't need the bad press. You can come back in. And so restaurant workers across New York City saw the success that this group was having, and they came to us with wage theft cases, sexual harassment cases, all these other cases, and then the union said, okay, that's way beyond our scope, like, y'all are gonna have to do something else, like start another organization. And so we did. Our co-founders, Saru Jayaraman and Fekak Mamdou, started the Restaurant Opportunity Center. And now, we are in 10 cities across the country. We have over 25,000 worker members, over 5,000 consumer members, and over 400 employer members. So who can be a member of ROC? Anybody. We all go out to eat, right? And so for those of us who care about the people who bring us our food, this ROC is here for you. So, the restaurant industry has 12 million workers. It's the second largest and fastest growing industry. But it has the absolute lowest paying jobs year after year. The Department of Labor publishes the list of the 10 worst paying jobs in our country, and 7 out of those 10 year after year are in the restaurant industry. So how is it that we have the second largest and fastest growing industry, but the lowest paying jobs? And that's due to the power and influence of the National Restaurant Association, what we call the other NRA. So the other NRA, guess whose buddy they are? They're very close to Trump. And it's no wonder, ROC just put out a report, an in-depth report on the Trump administration's dangerously close relationship with the NRA. It shows the numerous ways that the other NRA and the Trump are working to promote a common agenda, and that includes, the nomination of one of the NRA's own champions to Secretary of Labor, the CEO, the party CEO, Andrew Puzder. He was nominated by Trump, and luckily labor organizations came together and we defeated the nomination of Andrew Puzder, which was a great success. Thank you. And they're also in partnership to try to repeal the healthcare reform. The other NRA has contributed to the repeal of the ACA. The other NRA is also in complete silence on the president's violation of the emoluments clause of the Constitution, which puts their own members at risk. So people aren't going to NRA's restaurants and hotels because they're canceling those contracts and they're going to Trump hotels. And that is a direct violation of the emoluments clause of the Constitution, which, by the way, our restaurant association, RAISE, it stands for Restaurants Advancing Industry Standards and Employment, they came together and they joined the emoluments lawsuit. But the other NRA has been completely silent on that conflict of interest. And not to mention, you know, the NRA has embraced the Trump administration exclusionary policies attacking women, immigrants, communities of color. And even though the restaurant industry's workforce is majority of women, workers of color, it's the largest employer of foreign-born workers, including undocumented workers. And so why is, you know, the root of this problem is because of the subminimum wage for tipped workers. So we all know, you know, the federal minimum wage is $7.25, but for tipped workers, it's $2.13. And it's been that way for 26 years. It hasn't increased a penny because of the other NRA. You know, they're 10th largest lobbying group in Congress. And so you look at this two-tiered wage system, and it leads to sexual harassment cases are 5 times larger in the restaurant industry than any other industry in our country. And we all see it from the customers, right? The grabbing, the touching, whatever. Those of us who have tipped workers understand it. But you also get it from your managers. Wear the low-cut skirt, you know, the shirt, wear the shorter skirt, you know, wear lipstick, smile more, you get more tips. And so your manager becomes, you know, your pimp, essentially. And it's no wonder, you know, the women learned their self-worth off of these tips, and it's no wonder, you know, 53% of white women voted for Trump, because Trump is not the gross guy hitting on them, he's the good tipper. And we need to stop that. It's also, and I'll end with this statement, you know, ROC has looked into the history of tipping, and it's essentially a legacy of slavery. After emancipation, a lot of restaurant owners demanded the right to employ recently freed slaves and pay them zero. Just have them work off tips. The railroad industry took on that model, and we saw with the Pullman Train Company, we had the first black union organize around that and demand their rights. The restaurant industry never did that. And so to this day, we have a president who's supporting the legacy of slavery, who the two-tiered wage system is a direct attack on women. So it's not just a minimum wage issue, it's a gender justice issue, it's a racial justice issue, and ROC is pushing the One Fair Wage campaigns in 5 states to eliminate that gross history of tipping, and we hope that you all can join us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. And now is a proud partner with ROC United in the Sanctuary Restaurants campaign, and we have worked with ROC United on the One Fair Wage campaign. We'll be with you in solidarity for sure. Our next speaker is the amazing Carla Hernandez-Matz. She was elected president of the United Teachers of Dade in 2016, a first generation American of Honduran descent, born and raised in Miami. Carla has a bachelor's degree from Florida International, from Florida International University in emotionally handicapped education, and she has a master's degree in business management from St. Thomas University. She was a teacher of students with special needs in the Miami-Dade public schools for 10 years before she won election in 2013 as Secretary-Treasurer of the United Teachers of Dade. This is the largest union in the southeastern United States, but also in the whole United States. No, the southeastern United States, the the largest teachers union in the southeastern United States. Carla was also the first Latina elected to an executive position in the union. Her active membership in her church has driven her to engage in humanitarian efforts overseas and has sparked her passion for social justice. In June 2014, Carla was appointed the chairperson of the American Federation of Teachers Women's Rights Committee. She is a member of the Florida Education Association's governance board and was elected as a member of the FEA, Florida Education Association's cabinet, in July of 2015. She has also been a national presenter for the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, and the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, or LACLA. When the women of South Florida stood together at their own rally in support of the Women's March on Washington, Carla spoke about her own reasons for joining the march. And I just want to quote from some of the things that she said. She said this: "I march for my 96-year-old abuelita, who was not allowed to go to school and learn to read and write simply because of her gender. I march for her and all the other children that at a young age already know what it's like to work and do not know what it's like to be a child. I march for her because she knows the unimaginable pain of losing a child to gun violence. I march for my mother and her unwavering support for teaching me how to care and love my children. I march for my 3-year-old daughter for her ability to dream in being anything she wants to be. I march for the teachers in our communities that day in and day out take care of and educate all of our children. I march for all of our dreamers, because we believe that every student should reach their fullest potential and pursue the American dream that still exists." I am so glad that Carla Hernandez-Matz has marched here today. We welcome her spirit, we welcome her energy, her passion, and her dedication to her community. Please welcome Carla Hernandez-Matz.
All right, what an introduction. I better do my job. So, good afternoon, sisters, mis hermanas. And the brothers too, because I see you. I see you in here. So yes, my name is Carla Hernandez-Matz. I am the president of the United Teachers of Dade, and I'm a teacher. Are there any teachers in the house? Yes. So I feel at home. So as a teacher, I'm going to share with you a little story. So follow along, because there is a lesson to be learned here. So once upon a time, not too long ago, there was a little girl. And this little girl was not able to attend school because of her gender. She did not learn how to read, she did not learn how to write, and at a very young age, at 9 years old, she was working in someone's kitchen. She had 9 children of her own, but that fire and that grit and that intelligence that cannot be calculated told her that she had to continue to pursue something better for her children. And so she made sure that each one of her children went to school, that each one of her children got an education, and that each one of her children continued to push forward and succeeded. And that's my grandmother, the lady that was mentioned that's gonna be 97 years old in September. So my grandmother, in all of her wisdom, knew that education was important. And so when she came to this country, she's a citizen now, when she came to this country, she made sure that she helped me in any way that she could. And she couldn't help me with my homework, so when I came home from school, my abuelita had a snack prepared for me. She took care of me when I was sick, and she made sure that she just did everything else that she could so that all I had to do was worry about doing my homework and completing it. And so I need to share that story because I believe that all of you are women of courage, and we learn from each other's courage, and we have to share each other's story. And so my abuelita taught me 3 very important things. Number 1, that you have to fight against gender inequality. She also taught me that it's important to fight for children's rights. She was 9 years old when she started working. So we fight to protect children and labor laws, right? Child labor laws. And she also taught me that it was important not to let children get robbed of their education. And see, this is what I'm so passionate about. Because I believe that education is the last equalizer. I believe that education is the key. It's the cornerstone of our communities. It is the cornerstone of our democracy. But something's happening around this country. There is a systematic approach to dismantle public education. From the national level, Betsy DeVos, all the way down. I'm with the right crew over here, yes. Boo! All the way down to the state level, and you know what's happening with our governor Rick Scott and the state legislation and how they're dismantling public education. So those things that she taught me to fight for those inequalities helped me to get to where I am now. So what do unions do? Unions fight for children. We want to make sure that each child has a quality public education, that every child, no matter what their nationality is, their documented or undocumented status, what their gender is, that every child is well received and well educated so that they can pursue their dreams. And we fight for social justice issues. We fight for women. Let me tell you why. Yes, you can clap for that. We fight for women. We fight for women. So when public education system was established, in that period of time, women were stay-at-home moms. And men were the ones that had careers. But then someone thought they got real smart and they said, you know, we can use women because they are caregivers to take care of children and teach them. And we could pay them less. So it should not come as a surprise that teachers are underpaid. If this was a predominantly male workforce, I can tell you for sure that our wages, our salaries would be much higher. But because it is a predominantly female workforce, our wages are what they are. So we fight for income equality, we fight for social justice, we fight for things that are important in our community, for children. And so, I want you all to know that just as my sister was saying, that we have to support unions and restaurant workers, we have to support all unions. There's something important that's happening. We have seen a steady decline in unions. There's a national movement to de-unionize. And we've also seen that there is a bigger gap in income inequality. Why? Because unions were formed to fight for the middle class, to decrease those income inequalities. And as you continue to see that deunionization perpetuates, those income equalities continue to raise as well. And so, obviously we're gonna be talking about unions and their importance in the community. But what I want you all to know is, first of all, that I am honored to just be here with all you rebel rousers. I am honored to be here among such distinct panelists. And, if there's one message that I can just have you remember, teach your girls to fight. Teach your girls to fight. Support public education. We cannot become complacent with what's happening. We have to stay awake. We have to know what's out there. And most importantly, make sure that those young boys don't grab our pussycats.
Wait. think there's a trick here. Okay. Thank you so much. Now it's my honor and privilege to introduce Patricia Ireland. Oh, did you figure out who she is? No. A dedicated fighter for women, Patricia Ireland is the longest-serving president in NOW's history, leading the organization's fight against misogyny throughout the 1990s. She is also co-chair of NOW's advisory committee, where she continues to propel our movement forward. During her presidency, she founded the NOW's project Stand Up for Women, which trained thousands of activists in clinic defense who safeguarded access to abortion clinics by peacefully escorting patients and staff. She is a brilliant legal strategist, leading NOW's work on the case Now versus Scheidler, and taking the fight to protect clinic access all the way to the US Supreme Court. She created NOW's Elect Women for Change campaign that helped more women get elected to Congress, and was a major organizer of both the 1992 Global Feminist Conference that brought together women from 45 countries, and the 1993 March on Washington for gay, lesbian, and bi civil rights. Finally, she is the architect behind NOW's Vision Conference, culminating in our march on Seneca Falls and the development of the 1998 Declaration of Sentiments, an absolutely fabulous document. She has been instrumental in charting our organization's path forward. Please welcome Patricia Ireland.
What an incredible panel. I mean, is this a fantastic way for our first day at this conference? Can you feel the energy? Can you feel the excitement? Can you feel the strength and determination of the National Organization for Women? This panel puts before us so many of the issues, women's traditional work in teachers and restaurant workers, women's work as undocumented workers and organized labor union workers, violence against women and the criminal justice system, or as we have just heard, the criminally injustice system. There's so much that we've heard today, and as I'll explain in just a moment, serious voter suppression. When I ended my term as National Now president in 2001, I knew I would go back to practicing law, but I had been spoiled after 17 years working for the National Organization for Women full-time. My heart was set on working in a movement, and I am probably the most fortunate person around. I found a job as a lawyer representing unions and their members. In a so-called right-to-work state, may I say, it's part of a lifetime of tilting at windmills. And sometimes they fall down. I'm so proud to represent unions and their members. When I say I'm lucky, I get to work with Carla Hernandez-Matz. She's one of my clients, okay? I mean, this is way cool. And tomorrow you'll meet another one of the incredible strong union women it's been my honor to represent, Kim Schultz, who is the only woman on the executive committee of the Teamsters International. So that's why you will never find me wearing a t-shirt without a union bug on it, or passing out flyers that don't have a union bug on them. Ooh, There's another one. My gratitude to Now's ally, the Restaurant Opportunities Center, and Diane Ramirez runs deep, as does my respect and admiration for Marissa Alexander. Perhaps you know that Florida is one of only 3 states that bans Marissa and others who have been convicted as felons from voting or other civil rights. We are one of 3 states. That means that 1 out of 5 African American adults here cannot vote. That is a serious voter suppression issue. But it's one voter suppression tactic that we in the National Organization for Women in Florida have an opportunity to change. If you're from Florida, let me urge you to sign a petition to amend our state constitution so that we can restore the civil and voting rights of Marissa's all over this state. Now, I have confirmed with Mary Wilson that she brought petitions for the All Feminists United for Women Now for Women's Lives campaign table. I have put them on the Rise Up Now table. That's the one thing we can all agree on, okay? So every Floridian should be out there signing at the break. I know that after November 8th, many of us spent a lot of time discouraged, depressed, curled up in our beds in the fetal position with the covers pulled up, or was that just me? So I'm here today with props to Taylor Swift to help everybody shake it off, okay? Shake it off. One of the advantages of living long is perspective. So let me share with you the silver lining in the aftermath of the 2016 campaign. A good measure of just how much progress we have made in our period as an organization is the size of the backlash we are facing, the threat that we pose to a patriarchal, misogynist culture. From the late 1970s through the 80s, early 80s, hundreds of thousands of us cut our political teeth in Now's Equal Rights Amendment Countdown campaign, spearheaded by Ellie Smeal. We learned public speaking, fundraising, community outreach. We learned media, we learned door-to-door and telephone canvassing, and so much more. And by the end of the ERA Countdown campaign, we had built the modern feminist movement into a nationwide force to be reckoned with. We were trained, organized, and after a handful of state legislators, including in Tallahassee, Florida, blocked ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, we were pissed. I'm sorry, we were really angry. And we were determined never again to beg for our rights from rich, white, able-bodied, and apparently straight men. We decided that rather than beg for our rights from men in power, we were going to become the people in power. We began recruiting, running, and electing women and men who supported equality, and we have literally changed the face of power in this country. I will tell you that the election of the first woman president of the United States would have been a major milestone in that strategy, and we came heartbreakingly close with Hillary Rodham Clinton. So as of today, right here, right now, join me as we shake it off. Shake off that loss, because the silver lining in the aftermath of the 2016 election is an overwhelming groundswell of new and renewed activism, a stronger, more vibrant global movement for equality, justice, and peace. The day after the inauguration, more than 5.6 million people announced our resistance in some 661 actions. Women and men, individuals and families, groups, all stood in solidarity that day for equal rights, human rights, and progress. We stood together not only in the United States, but all around the world, in 92 countries, on all 7 continents. We are on the verge of another extraordinary strengthening and expansion of our movements. I'm reminded of the email I once received as president of NOW from the Mongolian women. They closed their email with this: "We are the daughters of Genghis Khan. We will not be suppressed easily." Well, we are the daughters of Sojourner Truth, of Susan B. Anthony, of Evangeline Casio y Cisneros, Ida B. Wells, Jovita Idar Juarez, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Emma Goldman, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and we will not be suppressed easily. What happens in the next 4 years is up to us. We will not go back. We'll go forward with strength and determination, won't we? Thank you for all you have done and all you're going to do.
So we do have time for question and answers. Anyone would like to ask a question? There's a microphone on this aisle over here. There's a microphone over here. It's an amazing, amazing panel. I wanted to talk a little bit about, and we talked about that this morning, but I really want to talk more. This morning on the panel, we talked a little bit about intersectionality, about the so-called controversy around identity politics, and what I want to talk about is from a labor point of view, right? Because so many of you, Patricia and Carla and Diana, you're all sort of working in that space. What are you experiencing in terms of being able to organize women, particularly women of color, particularly younger women, and particularly immigrant and undocumented women? How is that working? What are your thoughts of that?
So, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So that's interesting because there's so many things that are changing right now. First, no?
I couldn't hear. Okay. Here, it's not turned. Oh, it is turned on here.
Better? Oh, yeah. So I think that we're in an interesting space. A lot of things have happened nationally that have really encouraged people to step out and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I like to say that because in order to create change, in order to be active, in order to really do something, you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. That means showing up at rallies. That means that you have to, you're gonna come out to places and you're gonna cause trouble. We're gonna be, rebel rousers. What I alluded to earlier. But what's interesting, despite people wanting to do this and seeing willingness in people to show up, is everything else with technology, right? We have so many millennials and how we engage them. Things are changing. Some people are very comfortable with being active only on social media. And so, there's different things that have been created. There's a system called 5 Calls that helps you to contact and to just, it organizes around issues and you become active in that manner. But but it's interesting because there are so many intersectionalities on how do we connect with millennials, how do we connect with undocumented folks. You know, they want to also stand up and speak out for themselves, but they're scared as well that they'll be identified. And so when you find those groups of people, what do? You know, do you speak up for them? You don't have to be their voice, but you can be a voice. And so, you know, in all these spaces, I believe that that unions are certainly helping. I know that my union in particular has done workshops to try to encourage people to become citizens. We have so many people in Miami that are residents that could be citizens and just have not continued the process. And so we know that in order for minorities and for women to represent us, we need to make sure that they're registered voters, and there can only be registered voters if they're U.S. citizens. So help them along the process. And so, I mean, I think those are some of the things, but, you know, we're certainly fighting also for healthcare and wages and all these things. And so we see how everything that we talk about intersects in so many different causes.
For our work with the restaurant industry and restaurant workers, it's been really tough, I'm not gonna lie. You know, labor unions weren't started when I guess labor unions don't have a history of organizing low-wage workers, right? They organize the middle class, and they organize white men. And until unions and it's not the union, the leadership, you know, it's not personal. It's the structure, it's the infrastructure of the old labor system. Unless that changes to include people of color and Latinos, especially, because Latinos are the future of labor unions if we want to survive, and low-wage workers, we're going to continue seeing a decline. And, you know, the restaurant industry is really hard to organize because well, first of all, like, you know, when unions got their start, they weren't open to people of color. And so restaurant workers were people of color, so we were out. And now unions don't want to go into, you know, 1,000 different restaurants, spend days coming together on a CBA for 10 employees who may or may not be there the next day, because the transition is so high in the restaurant industry. And so they go to hotels and they organize with one CBA for thousands of workers, and they move on with their lives.
You have to tell what a CBA is.
A collective bargaining agreement. Sorry. Yes, unions speak, labor speak. And so that's what, in the restaurant industry, that's what has allowed Rock to really fill this niche and grow, because there isn't anybody else organizing restaurant workers. And we're a workers center. I mean, we're not trying to be a labor union, even though the IRS has come after us several times saying that we're not. We've proven it. And in these political times, you know, under the Trump administration, with DOL being very anti-labor, the Supreme Court being anti-labor, we're gonna see them not just come after unions, they're gonna come after worker centers too. And they're gonna try to pitch us as, you know, a massed labor organization. And so, you know, we try our best. We work under a C3 umbrella. We do have a C4, which, you know, the C3 is, you know, advancing low-wage workers and their opportunities in the restaurant industry. So you come in, you know, maybe back of house, you gain some skills, you move to the front of the house, you eventually move up to catering, or you get that, you know, 1% of restaurant jobs that where you can make $80,000, $100,000 a year. And so that our C3 side focuses on that, and then our C4 runs these ballot initiatives and these campaigns to eliminate the minimum wage for tipped workers. But we have to work hand in hand with labor, because one, they have the money. We can't ask, you know, fees of our members. They're low wage workers. We are, you know, 100% grant funded. And so, so we have to, when we go to the table on these ballot committees to you know, put forward a citizens initiative to eliminate the minimum wage, we have to have labor on board. And sometimes, here's where I will have some real talk. We're the bargaining chip. Tipped workers are left behind so we can get let's just go for 15. Oh, but one fair wage is going to bring you down. Well, we'll just take off one fair wage and we'll, continue our fight for 15, fight for whatever. And it's been that way for 26 years. For 26 years, tipped workers have been left behind. So it's not just one union or the other or this group or that group. It's this collective system. And until we recognize that unions aren't meant to organize low-wage workers, and until we intentionally reach out to people of color and women, then the labor movement is going to continue going south.
I wanted to ask a question myself, and that is in particular to Marissa, and that is, where are you in your organizing, and how is it for your work working across race and class and gender lines? How is that working for you?
Thank you. So as of right now, my organization is fairly new. So I'm really in the learning stages. And the reason why I say that is because what I did was I wanted to kind of understand what was going on in the movement right now, where we started from up until this point, and then see what I felt like when I came home was a disconnect. I felt like we were separate. I felt like even though we were women in movements, that we were siloed. I felt like it was, that there's certain groups of people that had gotten to a certain point, and because they had gotten to a certain point and their experiences were different, that they had forgotten their fellow counterparts, their other sisters, other women of color. I can tell you that right now I'm strategically looking at items and programs for young women of color, because I can see that the experiences are different. I can tell you that it's not just from a criminalized perspective, but it's also from a work experience. I can tell you, being in corporate America as an IT manager, that my experience as a woman of color was different than those of my counterparts that were not. And so I see that transpired even in the movement. I started to see that. Not everyone was like that, but I did see that. So I'm having candid conversations. I wanted to know. And so as I've learned those different things, I just understand that we are all kind of dealing with the same things, intersectionality, but our experiences are different. So it's incumbent upon me to help relate those experiences that the young women of color that we experience, so that we can get the help that we need, that we can show you what those experiences are like. There are a lot of Marissa Alexanders out there. There are a lot of Marissa Alexanders that don't look like me, that look like me, that are doing 20 years to life for protecting themselves, and we absolutely have the right to do so. I say that. We have the right to do so. So for me, because I'm military background in terms of my father was in the military, so we grew up on the base. And so when we grew up on the base, there's such a camaraderie, that you don't see color. I just really did not see that. I came from Fort Jackson, Columbia base, and then I moved down to Jacksonville, Florida. That's when I knew I was black. I didn't know that before. But seriously, it was a difference. And so for me, even growing up, just to tell you the kind of person I am, I love different. Different intrigues me. It doesn't make me fearful. It intrigues me. I want to know. You understand what I mean? And I think that's important. And also, when we're talking about engaging the youth, we have to meet them where they are. That's just it. And it's not a matter of passing on the torch, it's along sharing that torch, because they have a different perspective. Their experience is different. So I take into consideration of that. I sat amongst them while I was incarcerated, and I realized that I was afforded the opportunities that they don't get from birth. Could you imagine not even having a chance from the time you enter the world? And I didn't experience that. I came from a very loving, supporting home. So it is important to me to help this generation along with this movement, because I almost feel like we're a species that are endangered. I honestly feel that way. Women, but specifically women of color, I see that every day. And so what I want to do is be able to help them understand what healthy relationships are like and understand dysfunction and what's not normal and just the basic things. They would love to learn, and there's a lot of kids, they're very intelligent, very smart. But if I'm not eating and I got to take care of 5 of the 6 kids, I don't want to learn. And that's just the reality of what they experience. So we have to bridge that gap with what we have, you know, as a different generation and an older, more experience with that, of that generation, and they have to be able to trust us to do that, and that just takes some time. So that's where I am in the organizing. I reach out to a lot of different organizations that are working with younger people. And I'm very active with criminalizing women because I have an issue with the role that the system plays in doing that. You know, if you already experience abuse and then you are punished for doing what you absolutely have the right to do, I absolutely have an issue with that. So forever I will be writing for that.
So, yes, please tell us who you are and what state you're from.
Kathy Mayo from Fort Myers, Florida. I have 2 kids in the hospitality industry. One's in a restaurant, the other runs restaurants, and I hear horrible stories about low-income workers in this situation. What can we do as consumers, as restaurant users? What can we do to make a difference? How can we have some power, some leverage over that establishment?
Well, I'm going to start off an answer on that, and what we can do as consumers is tell your favorite restaurant owner to join the Sanctuary Restaurants movement. It's amazing, and I'm going to ask Diana to talk about that.
Hello? No? Is this better? Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. So thank you for that question, because I was meant to get to that in my remarks, and then I ran out of time. So thank you. So we have several campaigns running. I guess the most, the fresh one, oh my God, I'm gonna just give the popular one, the hot one, is Sanctuary Restaurants. So after the horrible day of November 8th last year, our high road employers, what was that? Oh, it's all right. So our high road employers, restaurant owners who take the high road and want to do well by their employees, came together and said, what are we going to do? This guy is going to come after us in our industry, and with this horrible immigration policies, the restaurants are going to be ground zero for ICE raids and things like that. And so they started the sign-on letter, and then they said, never mind, sign-on letters never work. Let's do something bold and powerful. And they picked up the Sanctuary Restaurant name and movement. And what that means is a restaurant who is committed to a zero discrimination policy, zero tolerance of any kind of discrimination, whether it's from the customer to the employee or the employee to the customer or anywhere in the restaurant. If you see any form of hate, harassment, attack, discrimination, you report it to the restaurant and it gets dealt with. And so they started the Sanctuary Restaurant movement, and in only 6 months we got 400 restaurants to sign on. It just launched in January. And so this is, restaurants from all over the country are signing on, and we're working with Now and Presente.org to promote this program. And as a consumer, you can ask your favorite restaurant and the general manager and the owner to say, please, this is important to me, please sign on to Sanctuary Restaurants. Also, one fair, and the perks of that is, as an employer, restaurants are, as private entities, they unfortunately can't, they can't evade the law, or they can't choose to cooperate with ICE or not. Like they have to let ICE in if they have a signed warrant. But they do have certain rights as employers that they can, demand if they have ICE at their door, or, we help them prepare for, let's not have ICE at your door. Let's figure out what we can do, with your employees to help you get to a safe space. And let's get you connected with a network of attorneys beforehand, so that you're not trying to frantically call someone when something's happening at your restaurant. So that's a sanctuary restaurant movement. We also have the One Fair Wage campaign in 4 states right now. We have it in New York, D.C., New York, Massachusetts, and Michigan. And they are statewide campaigns to eliminate the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers. So you can get involved, talk to your legislators, tell your favorite restaurant, One Fair Wage is important to me, because it means my sisters, on serving us here, are gonna be able to afford the food that they're bringing me every day. Because right now they're not. And let me just, point this out really quickly before giving the mic over. So because the tip minimum wage is so low, it's $2.13 an hour, the check that you get from the restaurant is so low that it all goes back to taxes, and you just get a stub that says this is not a paycheck. So you are literally living off your tips. So, the other NRA paints a picture of like, oh, restaurant workers are young white guys getting by college. It's just a transitional period. No, it's not. 70% of tipped workers are women. The majority of them are people of color. And of the women that work as tipped workers, a third of them are mothers. So they're having to put up with horrible sexual harassment, because that is the money that they're gonna take home to feed their kids. And so when you have the likes of Trump walking into your restaurant, trying to grab you wherever, you're gonna put up with it because you have to feed your kids. So talk to the restaurant owner. If it's a small independent restaurant, tell them that you don't want them to join the NRA, that you want, fair wages are important to you, and to join sanctuary restaurants. We also have a Diners United group, and you can join as a consumer.
Mary Bennett from the great state of Illinois, the home of organized labor, and Karen Lewis, who stood by Rahm Emanuel as he closed down 59 public schools and instituted charters. If that weren't bad enough, we got a governor right now who we need to get rid of. It is unconscionable that we're going into our 3rd year without a state budget. And why? Because he wants to pass his turnaround, quote, agenda, which will have the effect of eliminating collective bargaining all over the state. That man needs to be stopped. So I stand in solidarity with the school teacher and with the people who are involved in the food service industry. And we have to stop, patronizing these places if it comes down to it, and organize. That's what the opposition is afraid of, and that's what we need to communicate, that you can't separate us according to race, according to gender, or sexual orientation for that matter.
That's right.
We need to send a message quick that we don't buy that kind of crap and organize around it. So my question to you, how can, from the state of Illinois, is that campaign going to come to Illinois as well?
The One Fair Wage campaign.
Yeah.
We have it in Calumet City right now, and we're looking to get one in Chicago hopefully in the next 2 years. So we hope to go out to every state as soon as possible. But yes, we're working on Illinois. And actually, I should say 7 states are already One Fair Wage states, and they're working fine. In fact, the restaurant industry there, by their own numbers, the NRA's own numbers, not my numbers, your numbers, they're outperforming the restaurant industries in the other 2-tiered states. by every measure, because it's like, duh, it's a no-brainer. You invest in your people, you get better, you get loyal, service, and it professionalizes the industry, it stabilizes the industry, and then unions can come in and organize. What a thought, but yes, we hope, other than the 7 states, California, Oregon, Seattle, Nevada, Alaska, of all states, pays 27% tip. They're the highest tipping state in our country. So, there are restaurants there. The NRA says, well, if you adopt one fair wage, you're going to run us out of business. And really? Are there not restaurants in California and Nevada? I mean, they're doing well. So we hope, aside from the 7 that are already one fair wage, we hope to get more.
And that's
Thank
all I
you.
got to say.
Thank you.
So we have time for just one last question. So Joan, or whoever is next. Well, thank you. All right, thank you. Please tell us who you are and what state you're from.
Hi, Sheila Neese. I'm from Pasco County, Newport Richey, Florida. Ladies. And by way of Jacksonville, the 904, okay? So what is with this thing? Okay, so my question is, I'm 38 years old, and when I am at the gym, or I'm at the soccer games, or at the soccer field with my kids, when I am at the grocery store, when I am wherever I am, besides my now meeting, I am not constantly, but a lot of the times when women's issues comes up, I find that people that are my peers, that are in my same age group, 30s and 40s, that they feel like the issues that we've been talking about don't affect them. And I've been asked a few months ago, what is it that makes me see that differently? Well, I know what it is personally from my personal upbringing, my childhood, my experience in working, and what my background is, but I don't know how to flip the script with those people to have them understand. They feel like the issues that we've been talking about just don't affect them, so it's not really an issue. And I want to know, how do you address that? Is that something that you've come across? Because you're talking about issues that I bet other people are like, well, that's not my life. That doesn't affect me. That's over there in that zip code. That's over there on that street. How do you make it relevant?
It's a loaded question. But I've been talking way too. Oh, somebody else.
She's got it.
This is the good one.
I have all the answers. No. I wish I had all the answers. One of the things that I know is that among us, we do have a lot of answers. And one of the things we used to do in our chapter years ago was to sit down and kind of role play. We used to do it principally when we were getting ready to talk to the media. And we would start with, we would say, talking about was what we called it, like talking about restaurant work, talking about women's traditional work, talking about the criminal justice system. And the criminal justice system might be a real good example because so many people, just like 20, 30 years ago, they didn't know anybody who was gay. And they don't know anybody who's been to jail, prison. They've nobody they know has ever been incarcerated. Well, it's just not so, first of all. But because people who have been incarcerated often don't talk about it. It's one of those things that it's like one of those hidden things. It's like women who come out about being abused. That's also one of those things that we have been told we should be embarrassed about, that somehow it's our fault, that we put up with it, whatever. So what we did was we would practice saying, okay, so you're talking to one of your friends, and she said, well, that's never going to happen in my life because I've never been abused or I've never been incarcerated. Part of what we would do was boil it down until we would keep backing up until we got to the common place. So we could talk about the systemic problems. A criminal justice system, you may not think it affects you, but I will tell you in my personal life, among 2 of my very close friends have sons in jail. One of them for defrauding the government in construction of low-income housing. One of them for importing from China the ingredients for a designer drug. I would never in my wildest imagination, and I can tell you for sure, those parents in their wildest imagination never imagined their kids were going to be in federal prison. And in federal prison, you serve every day of your sentence. You don't get any gain time at all. So, I mean, part of it to me is we need to encourage everybody in our chapters and in our groups to basically come out about, okay, yeah, well, my brother-in-law got fired from his job, and he couldn't understand all he did. You know, he only hit his supervisor once. You know, do I need to tell you he's a Trump supporter? But in talking about that, and in talking about my sister being a battered wife from that same guy who only hit his supervisor once, I can open up some discussions. So sometimes it's finding something in your own life. Sometimes it is talking among your group and backing up and going, okay, well, the problem is something that affected Marissa because of her race, or something that affected someone who works in that restaurant because of their undocumented status or because they are poor. So I think that it's trying to figure out what is the commonality there. The commonality is a structure that has historically been run by the same minority group of old, rich white men. And so, you know, if you can start getting in that direction, I think I love the phrase about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I've been in a movement for social change my whole adult life. I am uncomfortable with change. Who moved my cheese? You know, I mean, it's like, so I think, you know, there's a lot of ways to get to that point where you can talk to your peers and practice in advance and come to figure out what it is that we have in common, what it is that might affect their lives. Do they have kids? Are their kids going to be affected because of the privatization and the dismantleization of public schools? Do they have, you know, family? I mean, it's just kind of getting to know them, and that's why I believe in face-to-face organizing. Yeah, you can do a lot online. Man, that whole, you know, Women's March, the post-inauguration stuff really came out online, and I still think you got to look at people in the eyes, and you got to get to know them at some point.
So Marissa, and I know Carla wanted to say something, and we'll just have wrap up things. And I'm being told that we have to wrap it up. So I'm just saying. But please, yeah, final thoughts.
No, I just, you know, I believe I probably would have been one of those people that before this happened to me would have thought the same thing, right? I can tell you just real briefly, while I was in prison, I remember being on my top bunk in a room full of 85 other women with 10 toilets, 8 sinks, and 8 showers. And let me tell you something. We all were in the struggle together, so we didn't see the color. And I remember one point I was sitting on the bed, and based on what you hear in the media, because that's another thing, and what you see, I sat there and I said, well, if you went by the media, it's actually more white girls in here than there is black girls. I did. So I was on the ground, I was counting, I was like, wow, you know what I mean? And it wasn't necessarily for the same crimes. It was, you know, different types of crimes. They also had lesser sentences as well. Their time was nothing like the sentences of women of color. But I believe that you have to get down. I believe, honestly, caring is a choice. You just have to care. You know, and I say that, and I'm going to say that you have to give a damn. And I'm saying that because I want it to be visceral. I want you have to. And if it doesn't affect you, it will affect your seed or your generation. And at some point, if you have children, your aunt or your cousin or your, you know, somebody will be impacted. And if it's not impacted in closeness, it's going to be impacted in your funds. You're paying for it. So imagine having somebody incarcerated or dealing with something, and then you have to pay taxes. You're getting double rate. I mean, that's usually how I come at it. I'm pretty, you know, pretty direct. But I ask questions to kind of get to the what is it that you don't feel like you're connected with? Because I believe I am connected. It's just humanity I'm connected. But, you know, sometimes it takes people, but I don't push. I allow them to kind of come to that by asking questions. That's usually my approach.
So I want to kind of answer that last question as best as I can, and so there's a lot of facets to it, to why somebody could not or does not understand what it is that you're going through or where you're coming from. So I'll give you a quick example. My son, who's 7 years old now, when I was campaigning for Hillary, he thought, you know, it was wild that she was the first, that she would be the first president, right? He couldn't figure it out because he sees his mom, who is a woman, who is a president, who's out there, who's a leader, and so he couldn't understand that we had never had a woman president, or we still don't have a woman president, you know, in this country. So a little bit has to do with your perspective, right? What you've been taught or what you've been seen, or what you've seen. But the other aspect to that also is just there's a lot of ignorance out there, right? There's privilege, and so when you have privilege, there's certain things that you don't see. I was invited to speak at the League of Women Voters close to the I-4 corridor to talk about human trafficking. And so there's an issue that a lot of people feel like that doesn't impact me. That's something that we don't talk about. In Florida, in the I-4 corridor, that's where it happens the most, but it happens in Miami as well. And so what I decided to do is that I brought in a guest speaker to a council meeting to speak to the stewards of all of our 400 schools to tell them what the signs are, because everybody feels like they're far away from that. Like, that couldn't be my student. That's not my neighbor. That couldn't happen to my child. And the statistics are outrageous. And so a lot of it is just about sharing the story, letting people know what's out there. Because if you don't help them understand, if you don't give them that information, then that ignorance will continue. So despite you feeling like people don't understand you, share your story anyway, because that's the only way we're going to overcome that.
Well, thank you all so much for this amazing conversation. I just want to say one last thing. I know everyone is eager to get to the candidate forums and the workshops that are on, but I just want to say I do think that engaging people, especially people who look like me, that would be only 43% of us bothered to vote for Hillary Clinton. 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump, and most of it, I personally believe, is that this was because of racism, that they responded to the racist and xenophobic message that Donald Trump put out there. But honestly, there was an enormous amount of white privilege underlying that vote. Women who understood the threat that Donald Trump posed, voted for him anyway because they believed that they personally would not be so negatively affected. Women who believe that way don't understand that their liberation is wholly dependent on our sisters' liberation. That unless our sisters are free, we will never be free. But it is white privilege that prevents many women who look like me from understanding that. And I think that is a point of we need to draw them into a conversation about how deeply harming it is for everyone if one of us is attacked. So anyway, you all are amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much for everything you're doing. All right. Thanks, everybody. This concludes the second plenary. Oh, I have Alice Cohan has a point of order. Yay, what is that? All right, so the question is, where are the constituency caucuses? On the bulletin board, Alice, there is a sign-up sheet. As usual, you may sign up for a constituency caucus. We have a number of rooms available. It's first come, first serve. When the rooms are filled up, there aren't any more.